Let's discuss today's heavens to understand what's going on in the world right now. What we have in the sky right now is Rahu in Gemini, and it's with Venus, but Venus is retrogressed. So let's discuss that. We also have Saturn in Aquarius, but it's retrogressing very close to the border with Capricorn, so let's discuss that. We also have Jupiter in Capricorn, so let's discuss that. And finally, the last slow, significantly moving transit planet is Mars, and that's in Pisces, where it's able to put a square onto the Rahu that's in Gemini. So these are the 4 key points I want to discuss today. So what's Rahu in Gemini all about? You know Gemini is connected with communication, talking, sharing information, right? And you know Rahu is all about upheaval and change. So Rahu in Gemini, one of the things that it signifies is a radical or significant change in how we communicate, how we share information, how we interact with each other. Rahu tends to be a very confusing and strange and unusual factor. So to have Rahu in Gemini indicates that the communications between people will be strange, confusing. We'll be getting strange information and be hearing weird things. Also, Rahu likes to change things, right? Moves things forward, and Gemini is also an inventive mercurial sign that likes things to be quick and move. So with Rahu and Gemini, it indicates that we have a big desire to change things and rapidly move things in new directions. In general, Rahu is an upsetting signifier, and Gemini is like about how people interact. So it's a social signifier. So Rahu and Gemini also adds into this whole mixture a sense of social unrest. So you have unstable interactions with confusing communication between people, strange information floating around, all fueled by a big desire for change that's got social unrest as the big context underneath the whole thing. This has been the case. Rahu has been in Gemini since early May. So just before the George Floyd incident, Rahu crossed into Gemini. Now, there's been quite a few planets in Gemini because it was the time of the year where the sun was in Gemini as well. And so trailing along with the sun, you usually have Mercury and Venus. And Venus has stuck around in Gemini for quite a while, so it's an important factor to consider. We would generally expect Venus in Gemini to be peaceful and influence people to be loving in their communications. But two factors have to be taken into account here. Since mid-May, Venus has been retrograde, so instead of what it usually represents, which is peaceful or loving interaction, it's like a challenge to peaceful and loving interaction. In fact, that's what we really are seeing. We're seeing people wishing for peace, and people wishing for love and community and fairness and equality between people, but it's in a retrogressed manner, so it's like we have to struggle for it. We have to fight for it. So although we would expect Venus in Gemini to ameliorate the negative possibilities of Rahu in Gemini, because it's a retrogressing Venus, you don't in fact get that effect. And the second thing you have to take into consideration is that almost the whole entire time, Mars is giving some sort of aspect to something in Gemini. So in addition to having the planet of peace be retrogressing, you also have the planet of war aspecting. Next, let's take a look at Saturn in Aquarius. Saturn should be fantastic in Aquarius because it's its own sign and it's its own male sign, so it should be giving a lot of power. And in general, Saturn in Aquarius basically signifies power to the people because you've got the proletariat Saturn in the proletariat sign Aquarius. So you've got like the common people in the common people sign. So it's power and strength is being generated by the people, signified by Saturn in Aquarius. But again, it's a case of a retrogression which began in early May And the type of this retrogression is Saturn just barely gets into Aquarius, like a degree or so, and then retrogresses and backs back out. So what you're seeing really by this particular Saturn in Aquarius is a symbol of people trying to get power, people trying to take power into their own hands, people wishing that they would have some influence on the way things are done. So you're getting the sense people are feeling like, where is my power? Nobody's listening to me. Nobody cares about me. Nobody pays attention to me. It's moving instead, Saturn is moving instead out of Aquarius back into Capricorn. So it signifies moving away from the sense of we have power into a sense of we better use force. Saturn in Capricorn is really forceful. Instead of a willingness to cooperate, you're seeing as Saturn moves closer and closer to Capricorn, more willingness to take matters into our own hands and less willingness to endure and persevere, like Saturn in Aquarius really signifies a humble perseverance. Now let's turn our attention to Jupiter in Capricorn. This is a clash in many ways, which is why Capricorn is well known as the fall of Jupiter. Capricorn represents skepticism or pessimism, and Jupiter represents optimism. So Jupiter in Capricorn is a dwindling or a challenge to one's optimism, and instead a rise of skepticism. So that's what we're seeing right now. That's what we're dealing with right now, is a real difficulty in having any optimism at all. Very difficult to be optimistic about anything. And it's just an overwhelming sense of skepticism about everything. Another clash between Jupiter and Capricorn is that Jupiter is the planet of trust. And Capricorn is the sign of scrutiny. You've got trust under scrutiny when you have Jupiter in Capricorn. So what you have is mistrust and mistrustful behavior, in other words, deceit. Jupiter is a very honest planet. So when it's debilitated in Capricorn, is a signifier of deceit. So on top of what's going on in Gemini, we've got Jupiter and Capricorn. The two of those together are like generating the feeling that, man, we can't trust anybody. There's all this crazy information out there. You can't trust nobody. Another thing with Jupiter and Capricorn is that Capricorn is a minimalistic sign, a Spartan sign. You could even describe it as kind of a thin or emaciated sign, whereas Jupiter is a fat planet and Jupiter is a prosperous planet. So Jupiter in Capricorn signifies a reduction of wealth. And so we have that issue happening as well. Significant challenge to the financial, economic situations in all the countries of the world. And so what Jupiter in Capricorn actually winds up promoting is like a pragmatic type of behavior, which is very Machiavellian. In other words, people will start to think, I'm doing this because there's no other choice. I have to do this. This is the only thing that works. It might not be the most glorious or wonderful thing to do, but if it gets the job done, then it's what we have to do. Now, this Jupiter is also retrograding, but the retrogression of this Jupiter is opposite to Saturn's. Saturn's retrogression as it came into its good sign, best sign, and then it turned around to exit. Jupiter's retrogression is just the opposite. It's finally getting out of its debilitation sign. It's getting to the final degrees of Capricorn, and then it retrogresses and turns back in. So what Jupiter's retrogression signifies is different than what Saturn's signifies. Jupiter's retrogression here signifies the feeling of like, we got this close to the goal and now we're sliding back away from it. So it's more of a sense of hopelessness and helplessness, and therefore a willingness to resort to anything that will have any slight chance of actually making a dent. Now, the last thing I'd like to look at in terms of what's going on right now in the sky is Mars in Pisces. Mars is a faster moving planet than Rahu or than Jupiter or Saturn, but it's still slow enough to be quite significant. Mars is the masculine planet. It's very fiery masculine symbol. And Pisces is a super feminine and super wet and watery sign. So Mars in Pisces puts a lot of symbolic clashes together. One of the things you can interpret from this is a lot of rashness, confused emotions which get charged by anger and then act foolishly. Generally, Pisces is a very patient and indecisive sign, and Mars is a very impatient and decisive planet. So when you put Mars in Pisces, the signification of that is rash decisions, impatience, and just like lashing out. With Mars in Pisces, the ability for Mars to make good decisions gets messed up by the emotional waters of Pisces. And the ability for Mars to take decisive and effective action gets messed up as well. And then the calm and understanding and depth of Pisces also gets messed up. So this is the factor that in and of itself is not so significant because it's just Mars, but this Mars has been getting aspected by Saturn and also aspecting everything going on in Gemini, including Rahu there, for the whole month of May. So this becomes an important part of the recipe of what makes up what we're experiencing right now in the world. Finally, let's take a moment or two to say a thing about what might be coming soon, probably what's going to happen next. What we're getting, the changes that we're getting coming up are Venus is going to go direct basically now. Right, so in other words, Venus's retrogression is stopping as we speak. So you should start to see more of the effect that you would expect to see of Venus in Gemini. There's going to be some band-aid now where there's more of a sense of solidarity amongst the people. Or people are achieving more of a sense of community, and cooperation should increase basically from today onward. Of course, Venus was a small part of the puzzle that we described. But the role that Venus played in it initially was that we were feeling a retrogression on these things. We were struggling to get these things. We should start to actually achieve these things instead now. Community, solidarity, people working together, people feeling like they belong together. Another thing that's going to change fairly soon is that by the end of the month, by the time July comes, Mars will get out of Pisces and go into Aries. So we're going to lose that element of just these rash, insane decisions and rash, emotionally charged actions that make no sense. We'll finally start to see more decisive actions that are more effective after we get done with the month of June. However, even when we're done with the month of June, we still have to deal with the fact that Jupiter and Saturn are retrogressing. And Saturn is retrogressing out of its best position, and Jupiter is retrogressing away from the end of its debilitation. So it's not like Venus's direct motion and Mars getting out of Pisces is really going to solve any problems. It's just going to enable us to not be quite so desperate. It's not going to be until these other two factors, Jupiter and Saturn, change, that we're really going to have a significant change in what we're experiencing now. And that change is going to happen in October. Jupiter first, Saturn like a week later, will stop retrogressing. And that means that once again they can begin their march towards the end of Jupiter towards the end of its debilitation, and Saturn into Aquarius, where you can actually give power to the people. So I believe that will be around October when the feeling of mistrust ceases to deepen. That means that up until October, we're going to have a deepening. And remember, there's no change to Rahu and Gemini for a long, long time. So we're going to be continually dealing with this issue of misinformation, smoke and mirrors all over the place, ludicrous things being said. We're going to deal with that for a long time. But once we get to October, there's going to be the end of the sense of, we'll have felt that we have hit the rock bottom and things will start to improve. We'll start to feel progress by October. probably financial things. I'm not going to say they're going to start to get better by October, but the causes that are going to be making them worse will stop proliferating by October. So it probably won't be till a month or two later that you actually get financial progress. But we're not looking at an eternal situation, of course, and we're probably looking to mid-October or November when things start to feel better, which is very interesting in terms of how that aligns with the United States presidential election on November 3rd. So, since you may know from my other videos that I expect Trump to actually win that one against my personal wishes, this may have something to do with it, is that the sectors of society that are on the border about Trump will cease to be pushed so hard that they have to feel negative about Trump and they'll swing back to supporting him. But let's see what happens. Thank you very much for watching this interesting video, and I hope you subscribe and like it, and see you next time.